Almost every parent has playfully swung their kids around by the arms, and a lot of us have childhood memories of swinging each other at playtime. It seems harmless, but you might not be aware this innocent swinging can cause serious injury, what's called nursemaid's elbow, a partial dislocation that can happen repeatedly if not treated right away.
The most common way for this to happen is when, dads or uncles take kids by the wrists and start swinging them around in circle, and the kids love it. And the dads and the uncles love it. But unfortunately, it's really dangerous, and it ends up harming the child and can give them an injury that has a chance of coming back over and over and over again.
That's Texas emergency physician Dr. J. Max Slaughter, who's popular on the social media platform TikTok for his explanations of medical conditions.
The other way this happens is if a child is falling and the parent tries to stop them from falling, and they happen to grab them by the elbow and pull up very rapidly. And that kind of rapid, high amount of force ends up pulling the bone out of place at the elbow.
That's exactly what happened to Slaughter and his daughter, as he explains in one of his TikTok videos. He stopped her from falling down the stairs and ended up having to treat her for nursemaid's elbow.
At that time, I was a resident, so I was a new doctor, and I had been rotating through pediatric emergency departments a lot. And it's something I saw very, very commonly. Kids come in, their elbow is flexed a little bit, it's rotated inward, and they're not moving it. The minute you try to move it at all, they cry or swat you away. But if you're not touching it, they're actually not in pain. So it's a very identifiable injury, even without x-rays. In fact, they've done some studies showing that fractures are very uncommon with the kind of correct presentation, which is exactly what happened to my own daughter. I was walking up steps with her. I was holding her by her hand, and then she started to fall backwards. And to prevent that from happening, I pulled up really quickly on her wrist. I saved her from falling and whacking her head, but I popped her elbow out of socket, basically.
The bones and soft tissues of kids, like the ligaments that hold their elbows together, aren't fully formed yet. And when those ligaments are loose, it can lead to a nursemaid's elbow. Ligaments thicken and strengthen over time, so Slaughter says nursemaid's elbows are a lot less common after about age 6. But at 2 years old, Slaughter's daughter was in the common age range for it.
And I immediately knew what was happening because of the way that I pulled and her immediate cry and the way she was holding her arm. So very quickly, I popped it back into place and I started moving her arm around, and it didn't bother her anymore. I knew I saved us a trip to the emergency department.
Luckily, Slaughter says nursemaids' elbows are easy to treat, but once it happens to a child, they face a 30 to 40% chance it will happen again. That risk increases even further for kids with certain conditions like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a connective tissue disease.
And so kids with EDS end up being at much higher risk of this. And this may be their first presentation to a medical provider to kind of clue them in. Wait a minute, why is this child having this happen to them 7 times a year when, the actual incidence of this should be 20,000 children in the entire US every year?
Unfortunately, most of the time, it's simply the case that accidents happen, sometimes repeatedly. For example, Dr. Erin Mizell, an orthopedic surgeon at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. She once treated her own daughter's nursemaid's elbow, but then it happened 2 more times.
I have seen 0, except for 3 times in my own child. The only time I've ever reduced one was in my own daughter when she was probably 18 months old, because as an orthopedic surgeon, these never make it to our office. These are usually reduced by ER physicians or pediatricians. So I never had the opportunity, even in 10 years of training at a county hospital, to reduce one of these until it happened to my own daughter. And then I've reduced hers twice. And then most recently was just a few weeks ago, happened again, because it is more common to happen once it has already occurred. So it's always been her left elbow. And this last time I actually had to bring her to the ER because she's now older and was not happy with mom doing the manipulation, because it's painful for a very brief moment, but it was too much for me.
So how do you know if your child has a nursemaid's elbow? Mizell says the first thing to recognize is that it's not a fracture. If nothing appears torn or broken, you can begin ruling out more serious injuries.
The kids can pretty much flex and extend their elbow, so it's almost like they're using it normally, but they won't rotate their forearm. So they tend to protect it and just won't use the arm normally. The first time it happened to my daughter, I didn't notice it until She was sitting down in her high chair to eat, and she was only eating with her right arm. She wasn't complaining of pain, wasn't crying, but she wasn't using her left arm. She just was ignoring it. And that is a typical presentation. They don't typically get very swollen. And if someone were to get an x-ray, it is typically completely normal. So it's kind of a diagnosis of exclusions.
Now, some parents might be thinking, why haven't I heard of a nursemaid's elbow? And how can I protect my child from injury while still having fun and staying active? Slaughter says you don't have to stop swinging around entirely.
It's a lack of awareness. We need more programs like this to bring attention to the fact that you can never rapidly pull on a child's wrist, even if they're doing the most fun move in the world when you're swinging them around by the wrists. That doesn't mean that you can't still have fun and do things that are like verging on being dangerous with your kids. I mean, I think that there's a certain benefit to wrestling around and playing with your kids in that way, but there are certain things that should be avoided, and rapidly pulling at that wrist should definitely be avoided. So I think the issue here is just lack of awareness and education, which is why my video got shared so many times. It got somewhere over 1.3 million views. It got shared thousands of times, thousands of comments, and people being like, this happened to me. My uncle did this. My dad did this to me. Everybody's commenting on their personal experience with it. And the good news is that only a certain number of people were like, and I still have problems with my elbow to this day. Most people said, yeah, after a certain age, it never happened again. And that was the end of that.
Rowdiness is a normal part of childhood, but if your kid needs an elbow popped back into place, don't try this at home. Unless you're a doctor, like one of today's guests. You can find more information about Dr. J. Max Slaughter, Dr. Aaron Mizell, and all of our guests on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. For more behind the scenes, follow Radio Health Journal on Facebook, Instagram, and X. This segment originally aired August 2021 and was written by Scarlett O'Hara. Our lead producer is Kristen Farah. Our production manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Greg Johnson.